Hi, everyone. Welcome to Teaching Reading with Confidence. I'm Malia Hollowell. I'm a National Board Certified Teacher and the founder of Plato to Plato and the Reading Roadmap. And I'm so excited that you are joining us tonight. We have more than 2,500 people signed up to come to this webinar, so there are going to be lots of friendly faces in our comment section tonight. I am joined by one of my favorite people on the planet. Her name is Kimberly, and she's our awesome community manager. If you've ever emailed us, you probably had the chance to chat with her. She's super friendly and knowledgeable and just an all-around awesome person. And she's going to be hanging out with you in the comments section during this webinar. So as we go along, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in that comment section, and either Kimberly will answer them right away or she'll send them over to me so that I can try and get to as many of them as possible. Now, I have a little assignment for you just to kick things off. I know many of you have been sharing where you're from as you were waiting for us to go online. But if you haven't had a chance to yet, if you could please share where you're tuning in from and also let us know your grade level so that we can get a good sense of who is watching tonight. That would be extremely helpful. I am actually tuning in just outside of Seattle. My family of 5, we live just outside of Seattle, and usually this house is filled with tons of noise, but my husband was kind enough to whisk the kids away so that so that I could have a quiet evening with all of you. And it's been very rainy today too, so I'm drinking a cup of warm tea just to stay warm. And I know a lot of you had snow days today because of the weather, so hopefully you're cuddled up in blankets and pajamas and staying cozy too. So looking at our comment section, I see, oh my gosh, so many of you. Hello from New York. This is Kristen. She teaches kindergarten. Hello, Kristen. Thank you for joining us. We have Erin. She teaches kindergarten in Seattle. So Erin, you're just down the road for me. That's awesome. We have Jocelyn from Boston and Elizabeth from Maryland. We have Mary who teaches kindergarten, and Kelly is Northern Illinois from kindergarten also. So it looks like we have a lot of early childhood teachers, which is fantastic. The next hour is really going to be focusing on exactly what you need to help your kids succeed in your classrooms, which is obviously our #1 goal as teachers. So please continue popping your location and your grade level into those comments as we go along. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen so you can see my computer here. Give me just a second. So let's start by taking a look at our plan for today. First, I'm going to break down the 4 signs that kids are ready to read. Knowing what to look for is going to make it so much easier for your kids to start reading because you are going to easily identify whether they're ready to launch into the formal reading process or if you need to continue building up their foundation. Then we'll move on to the 5-step plan for differentiating reading instruction. This simple system works in classrooms of all sizes and age levels, so I found it to be a real game changer for a lot of teachers. I'm also going to help you save time by showing you what skills you need to assess with new readers and what you need to look at with some more advanced readers because they're very different depending on the kids' needs. I'm going to break down my favorite tips for creating effective centers. I'll show you the 6 workstations that I set up and teach you my step-by-step for organizing students into effective work groups. Now be sure to hang out with me until the end of this webinar because I'm going to be filling you in on some amazing surprises that I have in store for you. And between you and me, I'm terrible at keeping secrets, so I'm counting down the seconds until I can finally spill the beans on this, but make sure to stick around until the very end. So let's jump in and start by breaking down those 4 signs kids are ready to read. As I mentioned before, having this list handy is going to make it so much easier to figure out when students are ready to dive in and start learning how to put those letter sounds together and actually read words. We'll start by taking a big picture, 30,000-foot view of the 4 signs before we break down each one. Sign #1 on our list is motivation. And this one is up at the top for a reason. It can really make or break a child's experience and your teaching experience too. Children must be interested in reading before they're going to put forth the effort to actually learn how to do it. Thankfully, there are some really simple ways we can build students' motivation if they don't have it yet. And I'm going to be sharing 2 proven strategies in just a moment. Next, we have print awareness, which is just a fancy way of saying that kids need to know the basics of how to read. Children should be able to point to the cover of a book. They should show you how to turn a page when you finish reading the words. Students should also understand that readers sound out words on a page by looking at letters, thinking about what sounds those letters make, and then putting those sounds together to make words. They do not need to be able to actually sound out the word on their own yet, but they should understand the concept between letters and words. Letter recognition is lucky number 3 on our list. Before children can read, they typically can name most of the letters that they see. For instance, they might be driving down the road and they see that big M on the McDonald's sign and they say, "Hey, that's an M." But this skill is actually one of the most controversial in the teaching world. In fact, you would not want to bring it up at a teacher's happy hour unless you were ready to get into a very heated debate. In fact, Kimberly and I have found out about this on our Facebook page because we've asked our Facebook fans who we love and adore, do you teach upper or lowercase letters first? And the responses are very strong. So we know that this is a hot topic. Some teachers think that letter names need to come first, while other teachers believe that kids should learn sounds first. So I'm going to tell you my opinion on the topic soon, but for now, just know that letter recognition means being able to identify most of the ABCs when kids see them. And last but not least, we have phonological awareness, which is just a fancy way of saying that children need to be able to hear the sounds in words and move them around to make new words. For example, we might ask a child, do the words cat and dog rhyme? Or we might say, what is the first sound in the word rabbit? I'm going to share some simple and motivating ways to build these skills too. Now that we have a big picture view of the 4 signs, let's take a closer look at each one and start talking about simple ways we can build the skills in our classrooms. So we'll start with motivation. For many kids, building motivation means that they need to build confidence. Even as adults, we are not always excited to try something new if we think we're going to fail miserably at it. Imagine if I invited you to race against the Olympic sprinting gold medalist. Or I suggested that you just go out for a little play date against and have a game against the world champion chess master. It doesn't sound like a fun Sunday, does it? Well, many students feel the exact same way about reading. They don't think they have a shot in the dark at being good at it, so they can't imagine putting in even an ounce more effort. Thankfully, there are some really simple things that we can do to build students' motivation if they don't have it yet. This first tip takes absolutely 0 prep time, and not many teacher hacks can promise that, right? Instead of calling students by their actual names, start calling them readers instead. So for instance, after story time, you might say, "First grade readers, please line up at the door for lunch." Or when you're getting ready to end the day and pack up, you might say, "Readers, it's time to put away our books and pack up our backpacks." You might even say, after meeting with a student one-on-one, "Wow, you are such an amazing reader. You gathered so many clues about what the story might be about when you looked at that picture." Just like a meditation CD repeats the same mantra over and over again, by calling your students readers every chance you get, they are going to start internalizing it and believing that it's true. And as a result of that, confidence will naturally grow motivation. Now, I am excited to share this next one with you because this is a fun freebie I'm going to be passing along. One of the simple ways that we can build motivation is just by making reading fun and mixing it up. So this sheet is a fun reading bingo sheet, and you are welcome to make copies of this for your class. To play, students pick one of the challenges and they complete it. Then they cross off the box when they're through. And once they've crossed off all 25 of the things on the bingo board, they have a bingo blackout and then they win the game. The sheet has tons of playful and creative ideas like read a recipe and make it, read under a bed, read in the closet with a flashlight. The list goes on. And all of the ideas are just really fun ways to make reading exciting and build students' motivation. So I hope you love it. Next up, we have lucky number 2, in terms of our signs that kids are ready to read, teaching print awareness. And that basically means knowing how to read a book. So to teach it, I like to use a strategy called thinking out loud. I pick just 1 or 2 skills to focus on during my thinking out loud session. So maybe it's reading left to right across the page, or maybe it's knowing the difference between a letter and a word. I introduce a read aloud book to the class, and I explain that as I read, I'm going to be thinking out loud so that they can hear what happens in my brain as I go along. And then that's exactly what I do. As we read through the book, I think out loud and I show the kids how I'm applying our focus skill while I read. So, for example, if I were working on pointing underneath each word, I would talk about how my finger is moving along with the words as I read them. As another example, if we were talking about using picture clues to figure out what's happening, I would tell the kids what I think the story might be about when I'm looking at the illustrations. So thinking out loud is a really simple and incredibly effective way to build print awareness because students hear the step-by-step of what is going on in a strong reader's brain. And that leads us to our third sign that kids are ready to read, which is recognizing alphabet letters. And I know that sounds pretty clear and pretty clear-cut and drama-free, but put on your seatbelts, friends, because we're about to hit a little turbulence. There's actually huge debate about whether to teach the upper or lowercase letters first, and whether to teach letter names or letter sounds first. As you may have already noticed, and I mentioned before, many people feel very strongly about their opinions. Carolyn, who's one of our Play-Doh to Play-Doh readers, wrote in to say, "Many of my kinders come to class not knowing their alphabet letters and sounds. I currently start by teaching 1 letter and its sound per week, but this means it isn't until around January that we're able to start sounding out CVC words." And for those of you that may not know that term, CVC stands for consonant, vowel, consonant words like the word cat or hat. So her question is there a better or faster way to get students sounding out words? Also, I was taught to begin with teaching the alphabet letters by starting with consonants that have 1 sound and leaving vowels until last as they are the most challenging. What order do you suggest teaching the alphabet sounds? My solution, Carolyn, is actually to teach both sounds at the same time. I have a brain-charging alphabet chant that I teach the kids. Every day we learn 4 new letter names and sounds. We start with the letter A and we move along in ABC order. I teach my class the name of the letter, the sound it makes, and a word that starts with that sound. So let me give you an example. We would say, A is for apple, A, A, A. B is for baby, B, B, B. Each letter has a little action movement that we do along with it that goes along with the word. So for example, with that A is for apple, as we're making the ah sound, we make our mouth look like we're actually biting into an apple, and we hold our hand up to our mouth so that it looks like we're holding an apple. So the combination of having the sound, the sight by looking at each of these letters, and then also doing an action movement helps children's brains make connections very quickly. And then they start to learn the letters, the letter names, and words that start with those letters very fast as well. Kids still need plenty of practice to apply this in their reading, but it gives them a really major power launch because they're learning everything at the same exact time. Last but certainly not least on our list of skills kids need before they're ready to read is phonemic awareness. If you're scratching your head and secretly thinking that you still don't quite understand what phonemic awareness actually means, don't worry, you're not alone. I was in the same exact boat, but I have a trick. When you're on the phone, you hear someone talking to you, right? Now let's apply that to our tricky vocabulary term. Phonemic awareness starts with the word phone. So that reminds us that it has to do with hearing, just like you hear on the telephone. Phonemic awareness means hearing parts of words and moving them around. There are actually 5 major phonemic awareness skills. Rhyming is usually the first one that pops into people's minds. Rhyming means words that end with the same sound. For example, the words cat, bat, and sat. And the words hip, sip, and dip. You get the picture. Next is segmenting sentences. Segmenting just means breaking into parts. So for this skill, kids need to break a sentence into words. If I said, the car is blue, a child would tell me that there are 4 parts to that sentence. The, car. Let my computer catch up. So we had the car is word number 2, is blue. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different words. We're next going to look at isolating phonemes, which means hearing the individual sounds in words. For this skill, I might ask a child to tell me the first sound in the word dog, which would be D. Or I might ask her to name the middle sound in the word cap, which is a. So let's try one for practice. What is the last sound in the word bug? B, g. So the last sound in the word bug is g. Now, what is the first sound in the word shell? Sh. So when kids are isolating phonemes, they would say that the first sound is sh. Very similar to segmenting sentences from a little earlier, syllable segmenting means breaking something into pieces. But this time, instead of breaking up a sentence, kids are breaking apart a word. The word elephant, for example, has 3 parts. Front. And if you practice breaking words apart into syllables in your classroom, you may have also found that it's helpful for kids to actually clap out those syllables. So we like to clap out front. Using kids' names is a really motivating way to break this one down, or break syllable segmenting down. So let's try another word. Let's try the word helicopter. I'm going to give you a second to count those out, and then we'll do it together. Helicopter. So helicopter has 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to our list, and we're going to look at the very last phonemic awareness skill, which is swapping out phonemes. Since phonemes are the individual sounds in words, to practice swapping out phonemes, I might ask a child to change the k in cat to a b sound. What would the new word be? Bat. Or I might ask a child to change the last sound, g, in pig to t. The new word would, of course, be pit. Now, I know that is a lot packed into just one pre-reading skill, so let's do a really quick review. The 5 major phonemic awareness skills we've talked about are rhyming, like the words bat, cat, and sat. Next, we had segmenting sentences, like when we count out the car is blue. Isolating phonemes by noticing sounds in words, like when we say dog starts with d. We talked about segmenting syllables by breaking words into parts like elephant. And we covered swapping phonemes, like when we changed the k in cat to b to make a new word, bat. Now, when we did this webinar on Sunday, one of our viewers had a great question. She was wondering if we should actually teach our students these fancy words. And my reply is, obviously, get a good sense of what your kids are able to do, but most of the time you don't need to teach them these fancy words. The reason that we're covering them here tonight is because I think it's important for us as educators to be able to have really technical conversations about the specific skills that we're teaching kids. And by being able to list these 5 phonemic awareness skills, we as educators can go into a classroom filled with students with very diverse needs, and we can really identify specifically what a child who may be struggling to learn how to read needs to work on before they launch into the formal reading process. So if we find that a child is really struggling with rhyming, for example, we can pull them aside and work on some rhyming activities with them and help them really strengthen their foundations so that they're ready to succeed when we move on as a group. So to help you give kids a boost on their phonemic awareness skills, I'm going to pass along 2 activities, 2 freebies that you can use with small groups or as literacy centers. The first freebie is a set of rhyming clip cards. In this example, kids would say the word cat, since it's the big picture at the top of the card, and then they would test whether that word rhymed with the options below it. So they'd say cat, stop. No, that doesn't rhyme. Cat, hat. Yes, that rhymes. And the child would clip the hat. I'm also going to give you a batch of Elkanon boxes kids can use to separate the sounds that they hear. So they're going to be working on breaking apart those phonemes. The student in this example would sound out the word B by touching that first green box on the left and saying B. Then she would move her finger to the next box and say the second sound in the word E. So B has two phonemes, B and E. After sounding out both parts, the child would slide her finger along the arrow at the bottom and put those two sounds together to say the complete word B. Now, some people get a little bit confused about this because in the word shoe, for example, they think, okay, shoe starts with the SH, that's actually 2 letters, and then ooh, that's really confusing. So that's a rule breaker word. How am I ever going to teach my preschoolers how to sound that out? These Elkanon boxes are not intended to work on spelling at all. They are just focusing on sounds because we are getting our kids' brains hearing the sounds so that later when they're actually sounding out words, they know that words have parts and these parts are letters and we can put those parts together and we can make words. So just remember, this is about sounds. It's not about actually spelling. Next on our agenda, let's move on to outlining the 5-step plan that I use to differentiate. Being able to teach kids at their just right level is really the key to catapulting their progress because they're getting exactly what they need. Our high kids are being stretched and the struggling kiddos are building up their foundation. So the question, of course, is how can we meet every student's needs in a class filled with very different reading levels? I'm going to give you a bird's eye view of the 5-step plan first, and then we're going to dive more deeply into each one. Step number 1 is assessing kids so we know exactly what they have already learned and what they need to practice next. Skipping this step is like trying to pull up driving directions to your friend's house without entering your current location. MapQuest would have no idea if you were starting from Cape Town, South Africa, Vancouver, Canada, or a random spot in between. Similarly, if we don't pinpoint where our students are starting, we will have no idea what to teach them next. Step number 2 is grouping. In order to meet the needs of every child in class, even when there are very different reading levels, we really need to organize students based on the results of those assessments we completed in step 1. I'm going to walk you through the step-by-step process I use to create effective reading groups in just a moment. Number 3 is launching literacy centers. I have a serious love affair with centers because they have so many perks. They keep kids motivated. The activities are reusable, so after laminating them once, I can pull them out and use them again and again. It's really easy to differentiate. For instance, in our sight word center, I can have 2 groups play the exact same game with a different word list, so everyone is practicing their just right words. And finally, centers teach kids independence because children learn how to stay on task and self-motivated. Next, in our 5-step plan, we have lucky number 4, which is setting goals for each group. Just like assessing our students helped us know where our kids were starting, setting goals helps us figure out where they're going to end up. Let's go back to our direction analogy from before. Having both the assessment and the goal setting is like opening up that MapQuest app and entering in the starting location and the destination. The assessment tells you where to start, and the goal setting marks where you're going to end up. Having both pieces of the puzzle helps you figure out all of the steps and turns you need to take in between. So that's why I plan for the end of the year first. It's called backwards design, and basically it means that you start with your end of year goals and you work backwards so that you can figure out the timeline and the sequence you need to reach them. So let's break down an example of what backwards design looks like in an actual classroom. We will pretend that we're setting goals for a group of kindergartners who are relatively new readers. These brand new kindergartners have strong pre-reading skills, so they can rhyme, they show motivation, they can break words into parts, everything that we covered just a little bit ago. But they don't know all of their letter sounds, and they are not sounding out words yet. We look up our school district's end-of-year kindergarten standards, and by June, we need those kiddos to memorize all 26 letter sounds. We need them to learn how to read consonant, vowel, consonant words like cat and hop, And we need them to memorize 30 high-frequency words. Now we can start working backwards to see our timeline and sequence. To keep our example simple, let's break our school year into 3 trimesters: fall, winter, and spring. Since 30 sight words divided by our 3 trimesters equals 10 sight words each trimester, we can easily see how quickly we need to move through the list. And now we also know that in order to reach our end of year goal, we need our students to memorize their letter sounds by the end of trimester number 1. And then we need them, because then they're going to need to start working on sounding out those 3-letter consonant, vowel, consonant words. Kids learn to read the beginning and ending consonant letters before they actually will start mastering those middle vowel sounds. It's one of those odd, it's just one of those odd things about the way that our brains make connections with reading. So I'll say that again because it's kind of like a little known fact. Kids typically will learn to read the beginning and ending sound of a 3-letter word before they master middle vowel sounds. So for example, in the word cat, they will learn to read the k and the t before they learn to actually sound out that a right in the middle. So that means, because of that sequence, in trimester number 2, we should tackle reading the first and last letters in the words, because then in trimester 3, we can add in that middle vowel sound so that they can read all 3 letters at once. By working backwards, we were able to see the timeline and sequence for teaching our sight words and our phonics skills. Although we used a scaled down version of the process by looking at trimesters instead of breaking it down by months, the process is the same. We look at where kids are starting, where they're ending, and then we break down the steps in between. So let me see here if we have any questions. So Erin Kelly wants to know, should we teach the phonemic awareness skills in that order? It seems to be in order of complexity. Erin, that's a great question. So as I just mentioned with the beginning, ending, and middle sounds, phonics skills are typically acquired in a very clear-cut and predictable order. So we teach, the kids' brains will learn their beginning sounds, then they'll start to recognize the ending sounds, and then they'll be able to learn their middle sounds. With these phonemic awareness skills, though, they're actually learning them all at once. So I might teach a rhyming activity on Monday, and then on Tuesday, we might work on syllable segmenting. And then on Wednesday, we might work on segmenting a sentence. So we're kind of building this strong foundation, and everything works together to get kids' brains hearing the sounds that they need, hearing the parts of the words, so that when it's time to actually dive into sounding out words, sounding out letters and sounding out words, they will be ready to do it. So I hope that makes sense. So the answer is, with phonemic awareness skills, you can teach them all at once. Once they move on to the formal phonics process where they're learning to sound out letters, that will come in a much more step-by-step sequential plan. But hopefully that makes sense. So let's take a quick peek back at our 5-step plan. The last thing that is on our list is staying flexible. Now, just like in anything in life, we are bound to make some mistakes along the way, but we can always pull out our eraser and try again. If a group can't seem to stay on task, we can move 1 or 2 of the kids to a different group to see if it helps their focus. If students need more time to memorize their letter sounds, for example, we can add in another 2 weeks of practice. The more you practice, the easier each step will be and the fewer mistakes you will make. So please, please, please give yourself some time, some grace, and some patience, because we can all use more of that in our life, right? So let's pause for a moment. If you are following along in the webinar workbook, we are going to tackle the assignment on the bottom of page 4. If you're taking notes on a blank sheet of paper, just jot down a 1, 2, and 3 on that paper for me. I want you to list 3 things that are not going as well as you would like during your reading block. Maybe kids are getting distracted during literacy center time, or some of your students are struggling to learn how to read. Maybe you're spending too much time researching lessons, or your prep work is taking forever. Whatever it is, write them down on your list now, and I'm going to give you about a minute or so to brainstorm. Now I want you to read through your list and circle just one thing that you'd like to focus on over the next few days. If you're comfortable sharing that one thing, go ahead and pop it into the comment box so that we can see some of the awesome growth that everybody has ahead. Now, by setting goals, we're going to help each other keep our eye on the prize. As we roll up our sleeves and start digging into assessment and grouping and planning in a moment, come back to your goal and start listing some solutions you think might fix it. This webinar is all about taking your teaching to the next level. So we're going to push ourselves to step up our game by making some tweaks and trying out new strategies. So Julie said, she said, fitting everything in. Stephanie said, assessing student abilities. Bianca said voice volume. That's always really one that we have to work on constantly, especially with those younger pre-K and kindergarten students and even first graders. Brianna said centers. Michelle said managing centers better. That's always a hot one. Somebody said, let's see here, Mary Beth said being more consistent with pulling all groups. Mary Ellen said fitting everything in. Yes, it is so hard, especially when it feels like we're getting more and more piled into our day to try and fit everything in. Amanda said prep and planning. You guys, I hear you, and I'm seeing the same sorts of things coming up. So we are all in this together. There is definitely a lot that we can continue to work on, and I'm hopeful that over the next 30 minutes that we have together, we can help set some plans in place to help you reach those goals. So now that you've identified a few parts of your reading instruction that you'd like to improve, let's take a closer look at the individual parts of the 5-step plan that we just covered so you can go back and start listing some solutions that you think might fix them. As I said earlier, assessment helps us figure out exactly what students have already learned and what they need to practice next. To help break down what we actually need to assess, I'm going to separate our kids into 2 camps. Our new readers, so those students who aren't reading words yet, like our 3, 4, and many 5-year-olds. And then our second group is going to be called other readers. Those are the children who have started sounding out words on their own. For our new readers, we need to assess those 4 pre-reading skills that we talked about. Their motivation, which means finding out if they're interested in learning how to read. Do they look through books on their own? Do they ask about letters that they see around them? We also need to look at print concepts by noticing whether they hold a book with the cover facing up, and if they turn the page on the right side when they're finished looking at the pictures. Letter recognition means knowing the names or sounds of letters. Now at this stage, kids don't actually need to know every letter name or sound, but they should be able to recognize a few so that they have the concept down. And finally, when we're assessing new students, we should look at their phonemic awareness skills. That term always used to trip me up. So as a reminder, phonemic awareness starts with the word phone. So that reminds us that it has to do with hearing, just like you hear on the telephone. Phonemic awareness means hearing parts of words and moving them around. So when we're assessing kids' phonemic awareness skills, we're looking at things like whether they can rhyme, whether they can break words into syllables, and even whether they can swap out sounds. For example, when we ask them to change the first sound in the word cat, k, to an to make a new word rat. The Elkinen sound boxes that I'll be giving you, again, are a great way to build phonemic awareness because they force kids to break words into parts. In this example, the student slid a counting chip into each square as he stretched out the 4 sounds in the word and hand. And you can also mix it up by having kids squish Play-Doh as they stretch out the sounds. Rain. So these are the 4 pre-reading skills we need to assess when we're working with new readers. motivation, print concepts, letter recognition, and phonemic awareness. They make up that core foundation that students will need to rely on when they start sounding out words a little later. So we want to make sure that they have these skills down pat and are not missing any holes. When we're assessing other readers, we're looking for different things because they have moved beyond these pre-reading skills. We need to assess their phonics skills to see if they recognize letter sounds and put them together to read a word. Do they know their letter sounds? Have they learned tricky letter combinations like the digraphs sh and f? We even need to find out if they know contractions. For example, if we told them the words can, not, and asked them to shorten them, would they be able to make the contraction can't? So all of this fits under phonics. And assessing their phonics lets us see how well they're able to sound out words one part at a time. We also need to assess these other readers' whole language skills. In case you're scratching your head and wondering what in the world is whole language, don't worry, I've got you. Whole language is just the fancy term for sight words. So your school might call it your Dolch list or your fry words, snappy words, high frequency words. The possibilities really go on, but they all mean the same thing. Having students memorize the whole word instead of trying to sound it out phonetically. This is important because there are a lot of common words that kids will see over and over again while they're reading. So for example, when you are looking at a page from a book, you probably see the words the, and a 10 times on that one page. Well, students are going to come across those same words over and over again. So we want to help them save time and a lot of frustration by teaching them how to recognize those words right away without needing to sound them out bit by bit. How quickly and accurately students read is called fluency. If you've ever done a running record, you looked at how many words a child can read per minute, and that is their fluency. The more fluent a reader is, the more natural and ingrained things are in their brains, because they don't have to work as hard to read, and they can start working on our very last skill, which is reading comprehension. That just means understanding what's going on in a story. Now, before I go any further, we need to dispel a common misconception. Many teachers, including me when I first started, think that kids should start working on reading comprehension right away. After all, if they can't track what's happening in stories, what in the world is the purpose of reading at all? But guess what? We can actually take the pressure off of ourselves, because until kids are reading pretty fluently on their own, their brains aren't ready to work on reading comprehension too. Let me give you an example. I'm going to read a paragraph to you in a staccato word-by-word pace. Just listen and try to keep up with what's happening in the story. The car ice is blue. It was feist. Now, if I started peppering you with comprehension questions at this point, it would be incredibly hard to recall everything. I didn't even sound out some of the words correctly. So if I asked you what was the what color was the car, or how was the car driving, you would have a hard time recalling. Reading word by word makes it so hard to remember and follow along with the story at the same time. So until students are reading pretty fluently on their own, it is way too overwhelming to expect them to sound out the words in a story and process the content of that story too. That means that we don't actually have to assess their reading comprehension until they're reading they're a little further in the reading process. And a good rule of thumb is to start assessing reading comprehension when kids are at a middle of first grade reading level, which corresponds to a Fountas and Pinnell level E or a DRA level 8. Let's see. Due to Earn said, that is true. I find that some children will begin to read if I use sight or high frequency words. I think it makes the workload less and easier to manage. Yes, and this is actually a really important point too. Some kids you're going to find take off with their sight words, and they still go at a snail's pace when you're trying to teach those phonics skills. And then you have other kids who are the complete opposite. In fact, on Sunday after the webinar, we got an email from one of our reading roadmappers, and she was asking, one of her preschoolers is reading most of her sight word list. She's just blazing through them. She learns them as soon as she sees them, but her phonics skills are coming along at a much slower pace. And so she was wondering, if this is normal. And the answer is yes. Some kids are what we call whole language learners, which means they see a word, they memorize it, and they don't need to practice it very much. My oldest son is very much that way. Other kids really are phonics learners, and they learn much better by just breaking down the individual parts of the words. And interestingly enough, my middle son is much more of a phonics learner. So it's somewhat unpredictable, but there are definitely, you're going to have some phonics learners in class, and you're going to have some whole language learners in class. So teaching sight words right along with those phonics skills is going to help ensure that your kids are getting a variety of things and that each of those groups is able to get exactly what they need. So that wraps up assessing kids to figure out what they already know so that we can determine where they need to go next. Let's go ahead and move on, and we're going to tackle our next piece of the puzzle, planning just right literacy centers. We want our high kids to be working on skills that are at their just right level, and we want our struggling kiddos to practice their just right skills. So how do we meet everyone's needs in a diverse classroom? Literacy centers. Let's talk about what my ideal literacy centers look like. I saw several of you posting questions about this just a little bit ago in the comments. So I want to make sure I get to this. This structure that I'm going to introduce is based on the Daily 5 by Gail Bushey and Joan Mosier, but I've made some tweaks to make the system work a little bit better for me in my classroom. So I have a 1-hour literacy center block, 4 days a week. I set up 6 stations on the first day, and I'll tell you what they are in just a moment. Each group goes to 3 centers a day, so that means that they go to the first 3 centers on Monday, and then they go to the next 3 centers on Tuesday. That gives me 2 days of activities that I set up one time and don't have to prep again. Groups stay at each center for 15 minutes before rotating. That gives me 45 minutes of solid literacy work time with a few minutes beforehand to explain the centers or give a mini lesson about one of the skills that they might be practicing, plus a few minutes afterwards for cleanup. Let's take a peek at my 6 stations. First on the list, we have reading, and depending on the day, reading might mean reading alone, reading together with a friend, reading around the room, or reading big books. I like to mix it up to keep the stations fresh for kids. So I tell students what version they're going to be doing when I introduce the centers for the day. Then I have 2 word workstations. The first one focuses on whole language and has kids practice reading and writing their sight words. They usually are playing one of my editable word work or sight word games. Now you'll remember I explained just a couple minutes ago that we have 2 camps of readers. We have those kids who learn whole language much easier than the other group, which is the phonics group. So when I set up my word workstations, my second word workstation is focused on phonics. Depending on what they need to work on, students might be practicing letter sounds. They might be working on 3-letter words or digraphs. There are lots of possibilities, but in this station, they are focused on the parts that are pieced together to make words. I also have I also have work on writing, and then I also have listen to reading. This one always makes me laugh because when I first started teaching, it meant listening to books on cassette tapes. But since that is so 1990s, kids now listen to stories on the iPad or books on CD. Each of them has a set of headphones on so they don't distract the other children in the room, but this is always a really popular one. And finally, there's Meet the Teacher time, when I have the chance to meet with each group of kiddos and really hone in on something that they need to practice. So looking at the big picture, if group number 1 goes to reading, word work number 1 and word work number 2 on Monday, then they're going to go to work on writing, listen to reading, and meet the teacher on Tuesday. Meanwhile, group number 2 is going to go to work on sorry, it's going to go to word work number 1, word work number 2, and work on writing Monday. And then they'll move on to listen to reading, meet the teacher, and reading on Tuesday. Group 3 is one more position to the right on the chart. So they start with word work number 2, work on writing and listen to reading, and then they complete the rest on Tuesday. By the time the 2 days are through, kids have rotated through all 6 stations and have given small group and have received small group and individualized instruction from me, so that I'm making sure that every single child is getting exactly what he or she needs. Then we repeat the process and start all over. I put out 6 new stations on Wednesday, and the kids rotate through 3 centers that day and 3 centers on the next. So Karen asked, how do you manage your other kindergarten students while teaching your guided reading groups without constant reminders to be quietish? This is the $1 million question, right, Karen? And I saw this posted in our list also today on our comments. So there are 4 strategies that help. First on the list is starting small. During that first week of school, we only do read alone so that kids can really master it. Then the next week, we add in another center. And then I add a 3rd center the following week. So by starting small and building up, I'm able to break down exactly what I expect students to do in those centers to be successful. And that leads me to our next strategy, which is waiting for meet with the teacher time. I do not start this center until about 1 month into school so that I can roam around the room and help kids settle into the routine of the centers before I tie myself to a desk. Observing group dynamics can be really helpful too. If there's a group that just cannot seem to pull it together, I like to stand back and watch. Maybe the activity is too difficult for them, or maybe 2 of the kids just don't gel. Once I can identify a problem, then I either provide additional teaching support if they need more help, or I can move kids around if the group just needs a little bit of a shift in the dynamics. And finally, using parent volunteers or aides can make a huge difference as well. I always have a parent training session at the beginning of the year, and I outline the kind of feedback and support that I'd like them to give the kids. So we talk about things like helping students find the answer on their own instead of giving it to them. We discuss using positive redirection instead of snapping. So having an extra set of capable adult hands is a major help. I know that planning literacy centers can be time consuming, so I want to make it a little faster for you with 2 more downloads. The first freebie is this clickable literacy center. Just find the center that you're trying to plan, and you're going to click one of the activities that fits the skill you want your students to work on that day. So let me go ahead and hit play so you can see how it's going to work. This literacy center menu is going to automatically take you to the web page where you can download the activity from our Play-Doh to Play-Doh site. This one takes you to an editable Penguin board game that allows you to type in your own list of words so that kids are practicing reading and writing the exact sight words that they need to work on. It makes it really easy to differentiate because you can create one board game for your high group and another one for your medium group and so on. Then the second freebie is this editable planning chart. You can edit the names of your centers and groups so that it's just a perfect fit for your classroom. If you give your group color names, for example, type those in the left-hand column. If you name your centers something fun and whimsical instead of read to self or listen to book on CD, whatever your labels are, type those names in the top row. Then hit print and start mapping out when each group will go to each of your centers. I'm going to tell you how to grab all of these downloads at the end of our video, so be sure to stick around until the very end so I can show you the easy step-by-step. Work groups can really make or break the success of our literacy centers, so I want to make sure that we talk about some ways that we can create effective clusters. The first thing I do is I make a little chart of my students' reading levels like this. Student names are on the left and their reading level is on the right. If you're feeling up to it, you can even make the chart in Excel. My husband loves Excel and loves any excuse to work on Excel, so he would definitely take me up on this challenge. It is not necessary, but if you like that as well, you definitely can do that. And then it'll help you with this next step, which is sorting the kids by level. So I clump my high group together. I clump my medium high group in a different spot, and then my medium cluster and so on. do not worry, these are not the actual names that I use for my groups, because calling them the high group or the low group would be a recipe for lots of tears and sadness. But in the beginning of the process, labeling it this way helps me easily see where the class falls ability-wise. And then I can go back later and switch the names to something fun like red rockets and blue boomerangs. So looking at this example, we have a pretty even spread of levels. There are between 3 and 5 kids in each group. So I would just keep students sorted exactly like this. But if the spread looks much more like this, where we have a big jumbo-sized clump in that medium-high yellow level, I would split them into 2 different groups. Having 8 kids in one group is way too many to be effective. So by moving one student over and making 2 groups of 4, we create a much more manageable number of students. My general rule of thumb is to keep groups to a maximum of 6 students each, because that number allows me to give individual student coaching to each of them when the group meets with me. And 6 kids fit really comfortably around the horseshoe table, so I can lean in and really monitor their reading. 2 more things to consider when we're grouping kids. Our pairs are a plus. If a child falls right on the cusp of 2 groups and both groups have an odd number of students, you might want to think about moving that child up or down so that the groups have an even number. With an even number, kids can easily pair up for partner games, and it makes it really easy to pair up for read together time as well. And secondly, personalities matter. A couple years ago, I had a pair of boys in my 2nd grade class who were super competitive with each other. They were the type that would battle it out on the soccer field every recess. They kept tabs on who finished their classwork first, who read the most pages, who spelled more words correctly on their spelling test. You get the idea. They both belonged in the high group, but I knew that if I put them together, they were going to spend more time fighting with each other than working on reading. So instead of putting them together in one group, I divided that high group into 2 smaller sets. Splitting one group into 2 meant a little bit of shuffling on my end, but it paid off big time in the long run. So definitely take a closer look at each group to ensure that student dynamics will not cause a disruption. Stephanie asked, how far do you go with differentiation of phonics and spelling? Do you have separate lists or shortened lists? So Stephanie, in the beginning, I only differentiated that sight word list or the sight word activities because that is what felt easiest to me. My school had a sequenced list of words, so I assessed how many words each child already knew, and then I had them work on the ones that were still tripping them up. My low group might be working on list number 1, for example, while my high group was working on list number 5. I like to use color coding for my groups. So since the low group always knew to grab the blue bucket during their word workstation and the high group always knew to grab the yellow bucket, it made it really easy for them to grab their just right activities. As I became more comfortable with the step-by-step sequence of teaching phonics, I was able to differentiate that too. So my low readers could grab their blue bucket of letter name puzzles when they went to the Phonics Center, and my high readers could grab their yellow bucket with digraph puzzles. Just like anything, I recommend starting small and then building on it so that you do not get overwhelmed. Speaking of overwhelmed, that is exactly how I felt when this picture was taken. This is a picture taken from my yearbook 14 years ago. This is when I started teaching. It's my very first year of teaching. And I apologize for the grainy image, but it gives you a good glimpse into what life was like. I'd taken a handful of literacy classes for my undergrad degree, but I didn't really understand the step-by-step for teaching kids how to read, especially when it came to phonics. I just did not know what that was supposed to look like. And I was spending countless hours and nearly every weekend planning my reading activities because I wanted to do the very best that I could for my kids so that they would succeed. I wished that I had an easy roadmap for putting everything into place. So over the next decade, I became obsessed with reading. I spent thousands of hours researching best teaching practices and trying them out on my own students. I studied what my mentor teachers did that made them so successful, and I figured out a step-by-step system for teaching kids how to read. My students' reading took off. My high kids soared higher. My struggling students really started catching up. And I want you to have the same success and confidence. Imagine feeling empowered to skyrocket students' reading progress with an easy-to-follow step-by-step plan that shows you exactly how to teach phonics and sight words and everything in between. Imagine knowing how to assess effectively so that you can very easily and quickly pinpoint exactly what your students need to learn next. And imagine planning your entire reading instruction in just 1 hour a week so that you can take back your weekends. Are you ready to teach reading more effectively with less planning time? Do you want to help students not just improve, but excel in reading? I am so excited to introduce the Reading Roadmap. It's the training I wish I had 14 years ago. This is a 4-week course that walks you through the strategies that I know without a doubt will accelerate your students' reading growth and launch your teaching to the next level. When you join, you will receive my printable assessments that pinpoint exactly what each student already knows and what they need to tackle next. This is where you're going to be able to sit down with your children, spend 15 minutes asking them each of those pre-reading skills that we talked about earlier and pinpointing where their holes are and what they need to learn before they're able to move on to the formal reading process. My favorite part of these assessments is that they include the specific follow-up activity you need to complete if students are struggling. So it takes all of the guesswork out of the process. You will also receive the step-by-step sequence that I use to teach phonics, whole language, and reading comprehension to kids. I'm going to show you the exact order for teaching letter names, letter sounds, digraphs, and everything in between. No more worrying about whether you're doing it right. To make it easy for you to plan your literacy centers, the Reading Roadmap comes with 240 printable games organized by skill. Imagine being able to open up a file and find 10 rhyming activities ready to just print and play. It's a major time saver. Plus, you'll also have 2 live group coaching calls with me tackling your specific needs. I want you to expect breakthrough moments, advanced strategies, and rubber meets the road problem solving because we are in this together and I really want you to succeed. Maybe you feel overwhelmed about teaching kids how to read and you need an easy step-by-step for putting everything in place. Maybe you worry that some of your students are slipping through the cracks because you can't figure out how to differentiate your activities for everyone in class. Or maybe you want to step up your game with your literacy centers so that you can make the time that kids spend in those centers more effective and motivating. You do not have to pay $1,000 for a graduate level reading course because I'm about to hand you a proven, easy to follow system for teaching reading so that you can eliminate your second guessing and become a teaching rock star. You are going to join a supportive community of incredibly dedicated teachers who have the same goals and passions and commitment to education that you do so that you can brainstorm and collaborate and troubleshoot. I am so excited to show you how to easily track student progress so that you know exactly what they need to learn next, how to keep kids motivated so that they love learning to read, how to plan reading lessons efficiently so that you can take back your weekends, and most importantly, make sure that you attain every goal you wrote on your sheet earlier so that every bit of energy you put into reading instruction has wildly effective results. When you enroll in the Reading Roadmap, you get access to a 4-week training program giving you easy-to-follow videos and sanity-saving printables. You get access to a private Facebook group with like-minded educators, more than 240 printable literacy centers organized by skill, bi-weekly group coaching calls with me to help you troubleshoot along the way, plus a treasure trove of cheat sheets to save you time and sanity. But when you join, this is my favorite part of all, you also get 15 professional development hours that you can use towards your graduate degree or your continuing education credits. You get to decide how you use these. Now, every state, of course, has different requirements, so we ask you to chat with your district office before committing to that, but just know that you will receive a certificate for 15 professional development hours. Now, all of this comes with the program, but when you join by tomorrow at midnight, you will also receive 3 action taker bonuses. First, you're going to get instant access to a bonus module that dives deeper into the 4 signs kids are ready to read so that you feel incredibly prepared to build up kids' strong foundation of skills. You'll also receive a must-have assessment that makes it crystal clear whether students have mastered those 4 pre-reading skills and tells you what activities to do if they are not. Plus, you will receive my 90 days of lesson plans that walk you through exactly what I teach, which means the mini lessons, the literacy centers, everything. When you add all of that up, it's a total value of $1,237 worth of teaching must-haves, and that's not even counting the unannounced surprises and value bombs that I'm going to be dropping on you once we get started. But because I am super excited to welcome you and watch you become a rockstar reading teacher in just a few weeks, I am excited to give you the opportunity to enroll in the Reading Roadmap today at the special price of just 4 monthly payments of $97 or 1 payment of $297. If you're on the fence or if other trainings have left you stranded and skeptical, I want to give you every opportunity to put the Reading Roadmap into action and finally become the reading rockstar teacher that you have been dreaming about. And that's why I'm giving you a full 30 days to go through the training and keep up with the assignments, implement the systems, and hit play on your new teaching system. If you reach out within 30 days to show me that you've kept up with all of the work and for some crazy reason you still haven't seen any progress, then I will be happy to return the investment. The Reading Roadmap is the training I wish I had 14 years ago. And now I am proud to give you access to the systems that I know without a doubt will accelerate your students' reading and kick things up to the next level. With a complete course leading you every step of the way and a 30-day guarantee, there really hasn't been a better time to give it an honest shot. Class officially starts next Monday, January 22nd. The sign-up link is in your email inbox, so hop over to the Reading Roadmap page and join. While you're there, you can grab all of those bonus printables I've been telling you about. They are a great preview of the awesome resources that are waiting for you in the formal Reading Roadmap class. Simply scroll down to the very bottom of the webpage and click on the link that says Webinar Bonus. It's in the footer, and you do not need to register for the Reading Roadmap course to get these freebies. You can just scroll to the bottom and click that link. And again, it's a great preview of all of the awesome things that are to come. But be warned, those action taker bonuses go away tomorrow, so I don't want you to miss out on that amazing deal. Today's training is just the tip of the iceberg to your massive transformation, and I am so excited to give you access to the proven strategies that I know without a doubt will launch your teaching to the next level. Start planning and prepping your entire reading instruction in just 1 hour a week so you can take back your weekends. Design highly differentiated reading group lessons so that your students' reading soars and become the teacher that every parent requests. I cannot wait to take you through the step-by-step of becoming a rockstar reading teacher in 4 weeks flat. See you on the other side. Good night.